Hello, welcome to Cordkillers Reckoning. The world of entertainment is turned upside down, and we're just trying to find out how to watch what we want, where we want, whenever we want. Brian, where's the good stuff?
Oh, the good stuff is in my premonition that while you very slowly set up the introduction to the show, I will run over to the soundboard and turn off the in-studio monitor so we don't hear doublings of Tom's voice.
What? How could you know that that was true? Unless you somehow were a magician, which Brian, in fact, is a magician.
Oh, how did I do it? Nobody knows.
It's amazing. It's don't tell us your secrets, Brian. But we.
I'll tell you what, man. We launched the show by the seat of our pants. We got a tenuous spiritual connection with Amos. We are contacting him. We are contacting him via Ouija board. My computer and my AC gave out, so if I look like I have a healthy glow about me, it's just heat exhaustion.
Yeah.
But none of that, Tom, is going to keep us from going on a supply run.
Supply run.
We are going to talk bonds.
We're going to take stock of bonds.
We're going to take stock of bonds. We're going to buy bonds. Who sold bonds? So many puns have been made in the headlines around the fact that James Bond producers Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli have agreed to create a joint venture with Amazon MGM to develop the James Bond movies. And the key to this is Broccoli and Wilson will step back from producing. The slightly longer, but not too long version of this is that the Broccoli family has been producing the Bond movies since the 50s. And they worked with studios, most recently MGM, I think for the entire run, MGM, to produce the movies and distribute them. But the Broccoli family held control. So it was always up to Barbara Broccoli's father and now Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson to make the final calls on who would play Bond, what the storylines would be, which directors should be hired, etc. And then the movie studio would go and make the movie. This making of a joint venture means that Wilson and Broccoli retain control, but they are ceding the day-to-day to Amazon MGM. So they will no longer be doing the day-to-day, we approve who Bond is, etc. Amazon will do that. And apparently one of the sticking points was that Amazon wanted to do more than just movies.
Yeah. So, first of all, just so I have the space correctly in my head, Barbara Broccoli is the widow. Like she's not a generation removed. She's been there for all that time.
Check that fact. Let the facts go check that. Yes. Let's see. Broccoli was born in Los Angeles, the daughter of the James Bond producer Cubby Broccoli, Albert R. Broccoli. So she is the daughter.
Okay, got it. All right.
Yeah.
So been around it long enough to have a strong emotional investment. Somebody who can speak,
basically inherited the family business and carried it on. Yeah.
Right. Somebody who could speak with authority to, what the families would want, what Albert Broccoli would want something to sound or look like. So enough of an interest to maintain some kind of like fail-safe, she wants to make sure that it's not possible to torpedo it because there's a bit of a trust dance when you do this. Meanwhile, I wonder if the conversation went, right, explain to me this whole Lord of the Rings thing. Why should I trust you?
Yeah, I imagine that might have played a part in this. And Amazon probably has some accounting that said it did this. We spent this, but we also got this from it. I don't know. But in the end, Amazon got their way. And so it's interesting to me that this is often being portrayed as Broccoli and Wilson have handed over the Bond franchise to Amazon MGM. But the fact that they created a joint venture means that they clearly want to still get the checks, right? And it does leave them a little bit of room to maneuver in the future should they want to pull it out, but it won't be as easy as it was when they were licensing this, right? Well, they're going to have to get Amazon's approval going forward on that joint venture.
Yeah, so this makes sense for a lot of different reasons because, of course, Amazon is going to perceive that they're only going to enhance the value. Both parties think that they're doing the other one a favor, right? Amazon is like, of course, we're going to make this an even bigger hit.
The best way to make this a success for all of us is blah, 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 blah.
Exactly. But meanwhile, the whole nature of licensing is you're allowing a party who is not you to trade on your good name. And there's been a number of parties. There's plenty of history of people running those values into the ground. And so, that's the reason that there's a transactional buy-in on that. But a new venture would give Amazon something it craves, which is creative authority to chase its vision, but in a way that the domain is clearly walled off, and maybe it's a way for Amazon to grow its section of the pie under its own control in a way that doesn't terrify the broccoli family, I would imagine.
Or not even terrify, but anger. I get the sense from a lot of the reporting, and I don't know this because I haven't been in the rooms, that there was a stark difference of opinion specifically about spinoffs. Amazon saying, but look at this franchise you've got. We could do so much more with it. And still honor the sanctity of the Bond franchise. And I imagine Barbara Broccoli, who's been doing this her entire life, basically, saying, no, that's just going to water it down. And like you said, it's a difference of opinion. Amazon could very reasonably, and I know people are making jokes about Amazon, run a franchise into the ground, whatever. Amazon very reasonably could say, you can still keep the integrity of the Bond franchise and do spinoffs. There's a way to do that. And there is a way to do that. Barbara Broccoli may either think I never could see a way to do that working for me, or she may just not trust Amazon MGM to do it well. And it's like, yeah, there's a way to do it, but I don't know if you guys are going to do it, because Amazon doesn't lose everything if they make a mistake on this, right?
Right.
They lose a lot of money. It hurts, but they've got an entire cloud computing business that, can keep things afloat for a while. Whereas Michael G. Wilson and Barbara Broccoli, their entire business is this. So they are more focused on making sure that they aren't harming the franchise in a way that Amazon MGM couldn't be.
Yeah. So what do we think this is going to look like in terms of when will we see something tangible? And if you were going to guess wildly, do you have a wish list of what you'd like to see or something you fear? And actually, I guess I'm asking you, Tom, but I'm also asking the listeners to write us at cordkillers@gmail.com.
Definitely. Please send us those emails. Obviously, what everybody goes back to is where we were a couple of years ago when Barbara Broccoli was saying, we're going to make the right decision on the next Bond. Don't you worry about that. Well, apparently the right decision on the next Bond was handing over the decision to somebody else. So now we're back to square one on that. But it does feel like now we can actually hear a decision. I think the more interesting place to go is what James Bond ancillary content would you like to see? It's very easy to just go, they're going to ruin it. They're going to put out a bunch of crap and I'm going to hate it, right? That's an easy and possibly accurate, but an easy way to go. I think the more interesting way to go is, if you're a Bond fan, is there something you can imagine that would be not just a mainline movie that you'd be interested in seeing? Can
I throw you something way off the wall?
Yeah, please do, because I'm having a hard time coming up with something.
Okay, some people are saying young James Bond or James Bond Jr. or James Bond outside of a Cold War aesthetic.
Yeah, like young indie.
There's a case to be made for all of those, but part of what made James Bond so great is the incredible Cold War tension between the USSR and the USA. And I don't know that the Bond franchise works outside of that framework because, again, you didn't have to do mental gymnastics or backflips to assume that England would spend a ridiculous amount of money on all kinds of crazy spy gizmos, because guess what? In real life, all the Western powers were spending a ridiculous amount of money on all those gizmos. Here's my pitch. You ready? Give me James Bond, note for note, in the 1960s, but Soviet.
Oh,
okay. Let me invest in a best-in-class comrade who gets like just straight up tell me the exact same story, but the resource allocation is different. The politics are different. The motivations are different.
My shoulders literally relaxed when you said that.
Would that be amazing?
Because everything I think about is like what makes Bond special is that Bond is timeless, right? You can have multiple actors play Bond and we're fine with it. We're like, yep, Daniel Craig, great Bond, right? And you don't set him in a period. The key to Bond is Bond's relationship to everything. So if you do a Q miniseries, I mean, I guess you could make it work and be about the lab and the developments, but it feels very cheap. It feels very like, yeah, but I'd rather be watching Bond. But what you did was save us from all of that, because you can make it a period piece without it feeling like you're betraying the mainline Bond thing, because it's an entirely different concept, an entirely different universe, and you don't have to play into the multiverse aspect of it. In fact, I would argue you should not in any way acknowledge other Bonds. Just say, we are watching a movie in a world in which James Bond was Soviet. That's amazing. I love that.
Well, and most importantly, it preserves that underlying tension, because for my money, the Bond franchise really fell off around the Timothy Dalton era, not because of that performance, but simply because it wasn't a proxy war between two mega superpowers anymore. They had to take on, I don't know, drug dealers and terrorists, which seemed beneath him.
Well, sure. Although I would argue the Daniel Craig franchise really did well with that concept. You're right that you have to do other things to build up from the concept that you didn't have to do when you had the Cold War tension, which Bond was created for. I mean, Bond comes right out of World War II. At least that's what I learned from World's Greatest Con.
We do. That's right. We do have one problem, and I didn't think about it until just this moment. We have the problem of it not being a good look politically to, no matter what, it's going to be read as chiming in on whether or not the United States is too cozy with Russia. It could be read as straight up Russian propaganda now, which I didn't think about.
I mean, it depends on how you do it.
Yeah, I guess so.
And I think you could do it in a way that doesn't play into that. You know, you could a few well-placed quips here and there, and suddenly it's like, oh, I'm watching a propaganda film. That
would be interesting.
Yeah. I love it though, especially if you do it in the 60s, right? So it's well positioned away from current events.
Do you think you could get away with doing a play pretend Blair Witch thing and acting like it's a found artifact, like the unaired answer to Bond?
Yeah, I don't know if that'd be pushing it too far though.
Well, because like you already could do that. If
I almost prefer
you
just be like, it's as if this was always the way it was right from the beginning.
Yeah, that's probably the better mega blockbuster. But as an indie project, like that's the one move you get that you wouldn't otherwise have, is you could do an indie movie and use the words James Bond, and you could with a straight face say, oh yeah, no, this was supposed to release and it didn't, and it was an attempt to co-opt illegally that IP.
Okay, so in my mind, I'm already going to the place of like the parallel that we're going for is the UK, the previous superpower, now operating and exercising its influence in a world by the new young, brash superpower, right? But we're focusing on the previous superpower, the UK, not the young, brash US superpower, but we have to play in that world. So in the analog, the Soviet Union is the US. They're the new young superpower. Who is the communist version of that?
Would it be China?
East Germany.
Oh, that's interesting.
He's an East German spy, and the East German spies were no joke. Like,
East German James Bond.
East German James Bond in a Soviet world.
The mere fact that I have confused feelings, like I don't have a heuristic where I instantly know how I should. I'm like, I know people in East Germany. I like them, but also they were definitely part of the other team in the 1980s. Oh, that's interesting.
The Stasi were, I mean, we're talking about like MI6, you know, is the more secret version of the UK's, or MI5, I guess, more secret version. So more secret than the Stasi in East Germany.
Okay, maybe he's a Russian operative working in East Germany with a a fragile coalition with Western powers to stop a shared threat, and then it suddenly escalates, and we find out that the shared threat was a fake out from a Hollywood jerkbag, and now he has to take on Western powers.
He's got to be German. He's got to be Klaus. Herr Klaus.
Cordkillers@gmail.com.
Yeah, let us know. And if we get enough patrons, we'll make this movie.
Yeah, you know what? A lot of people, I got stopped on the street the other day, Tom, and somebody said, "Excuse me, concerned citizen," and I gave a quizzical look, and he said, "Have you done your part?" I'm like, "For whom?" He says, "Well, the Cordkillers movement." I was like, "Oh, but my good sir, the Cordkiller Wars, they came and they went. We live among the ashes." And he said, "Nay, we can rebuild it. You want to rebuild the cords?" He says, "No, a glorious wonderland where we can always discover what we want, and we can watch it when we want on whatever device we please." And I said, "I've heard this line before, comrade." And he said, "No, you got to believe." And he shook a soda can in front of me, which was really weird. Then he opened it and it sprayed into my face. And I was like, "What was that for?" He said, "To get your attention, to go to patreon.com/cordkillers. You got to keep them loud, live, and independent, good sir." And I said, "Okay." And then that was it. So I went to patreon.com/cordkillers.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
What a weird thing. And how much did it cost?
You know what? I was able to pay whatever I want. Turns out that I was a true fan, and I decided to pay $5 a month. You know why? Because I knew I would never notice it. I knew I could click one button and never think of it again. And for the rest of my days, I could walk around with the smug satisfaction of knowing, not thinking, not suspecting, not doing mental gymnastics and backflips, knowing for a fact that I was a supporter of the fine arts and somebody who kept independent media in business.
No, thank you very much. Patreon.com/cordkillers. Now on to the search party. Now, Bryan, I know it's going to be a burden for you to come up with a take on this, but there was a trailer for season 2 of a show on Disney Plus called Andor. Andor. It's not a Boolean logic thing. It's a Star Wars television show.
Look at this guy flashing red meat in front of a lion. Go ahead. Keep just waggling that around, sir.
We are going to get the first 3 episodes of Andor season 2 on April 22nd on Disney Plus. And then subsequent 3-episode chapters are going to drop weekly for the next 3 weeks after that. Each block will go 1 year on from the previous block, and that will take us right up to the events of the movie Rogue One at the end of season 2. So the bad news is it sounds like no more Andor. I mean, I guess they could do post Rogue One stuff. We'll see. But this is going to take us right up. What did you think of the trailer, and what do you think of this release strategy?
Tom, I think we agree that in general, Pixar creates extraordinary moving picture shows, right? We trust them.
Pixar does. Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
Pixar,
absolutely.
Pixar,
Like the Toy Story people. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Always the best. So good is their reputation that sometimes when a new Pixar movie is coming, I get confused because I'll take my kids to see another kid show, a lesser kid show. Sure. And then in the trailers beforehand, there will somehow be a god-awful trailer for a Pixar movie. And I think to myself, how on earth can this be, Tom? Pixar makes good things. Why are there clumsy fart jokes and lines that just fall flat? And eventually I realized Pixar knows how to tell good stories. It also knows that it needs to get butts in seats to the movies, right, so they meet the audience where they are. Who's the audience? Children. They need kids to bug their parents. So Pixar, who makes very good story, will on purpose make they'll represent their own product in a terrible way that makes it look like a terrible story that I wouldn't want to watch. But I know they're going to make me cry in the first 10 minutes, and I trust them despite the trailer. Tom?
I didn't like this trailer either, Bryan.
No, Tom, I believe that everybody behind Andor knows, not thinks, knows that they have the goods, so much so that Andor 10 out of 10 on story, execution, direction, acting, everything about it is the best thing ever. It missed the mark on one thing, getting butts in seats. Nobody, because it was presented like, did you like Rogue One? Give Andor a try. Spoiler alert, not everybody liked Rogue One, Tom.
Yeah.
So instead, what are they doing? They're doing the equivalent of a fart joke in a Pixar trailer. They are meeting the audience where they are, and they are lying to the audience about what the product is. Because the product, I guarantee you, if you look, there's two totally polar opposite stories being told. The visual story and the audio story is one of a popcorn flick, but all of the text, who reads text? Not the people they're advertising to. All of the text is hammering on one message. Critics agree this is great. So that is the subtweet, is all the on-screen text. Everything else is the visual popcorn language saying, you guys should watch this. It's quite good. Which, having said all that, it wasn't for me, Tom. That trailer was not for me. However, I took it as a vote of confidence in just how good this season is going to be.
I like your logic there, and I hope it's true. Because they really need to overcome the like having Diego Luna look cheesily at the camera and then smile, because that's not what Andor is about. But you know what?
He is framed and dressed. I guarantee you, part of the calculus of that shot. First of all, that to me looks like we're going to see him undercover navigating those social waters with Mon Mothma,
casino or something. Yeah.
But if you look at the outfit, I had to go back and look at it again, because he is framed and groomed, and his clothing is the color scheme and the shape side by side. Look at that shot and Obi-Wan Kenobi from the prequels. That is, again, they're speaking to a different audience. And that is I guarantee you some thought went into that being the last image, because you always remember the beginning and the end.
All right, so I feel you, and I believe you can be right that the trailer will not represent the season. And I don't want to bash the trailer too much. It was fine, but I was like, this trailer would not convince me that Andor season 2 is going to live up to the level of Andor season 1. But that doesn't mean it won't, because trailers often are misleading for a lot of the reasons that you just said. What do you think of this idea of 3 episodes at a time? To kind of say, here, we're going to give you a lot of Andor. We're going to basically give you a movie's length of Andor every week. But it is motivated by the story. The story is being told in chunks that are around a particular event that happens, and then we're going to jump a year later.
Yeah, I think it's leaning into what they've already been doing, and it's just codifying what everybody figured out. I mean, season 1 was 3 movies, and they were independent movies. There was a little bit of connective tissue, but not much. There was a through line, of course. Great, steer into the skid on that one, and let everyone get this experience. And the aesthetics of very modern Tom Petty-esque music aside, I do like that the hidden message there is, this Star Wars thing is not like all the other Star Wars things that you've seen. So imagine if you hadn't seen season 1, that trailer would do a pretty good job of explaining to you, don't expect more of that Star Wars, because this is a different animal.
Yeah, this is telling you how the revolution started, not showing you the rebellion.
You know what? I'll go a step farther. That opening scene of Andor season 1 felt so much like The Shield. It was like a big wake-up call. And what did the Shield do? This feels like a Shield trailer outside of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah. I do think it's odd to blow all of Andor in 1 month. So I wonder if, and again, I think this is an artistic choice as much as a mechanical choice for Disney, in that they're like, oh, we're telling it in 3 episode chunks. Let's release those together so people can enjoy them together. But I wonder if Disney is also realizing that they don't get the bang for the buck in the later part of a 2 or 3 month distribution of a show. So if they can avoid it, maybe popping it out like this is better.
It could also be release schedule. They probably have other stuff in there, and they realize that they can get 80% of the traffic they're going to get by just punching all at once.
The calendar works that way as well. Yeah. Another big release coming up, April 13th is the date that Last of Us Season 2 will arrive, both on HBO and Max.
Yeah. You had me at The Last of Us.
Yeah, I don't know that there's more to say than that. Honestly, it's like, okay, we've seen the trailers, we've expressed our hopes and dreams, and we've just been waiting on the date. Now we know the date. Less than 2 months from now, we will be watching the next episode of Last of Us. So good on you. Do you know much about the Murderbot books?
I just no, I know nothing.
So the short pitch is these are books by Martha Wells. Murderbot is his own name for a sec unit or security unit who hacks his own brain to become independent. The SecBot is partly human, but not really even mostly human. A definite machine-human hybrid. In this world that Murderbot lives in, there are also augmented humans, which are kind of the next step down from Sec Unit, where they have augments, but they're still mostly human. And then there's just regular humans. And the story is told from the perspective of Murderbot. And Murderbot makes friends with some humans, and tries to fit in, and tries to stay away from the corporation that he freed, or she freed himself from. We don't really know. This is the show of that story that is being created by Apple TV Plus with Alexander Skarsgård playing Murderbot, and it's coming on May 16th, running through July 11th.
So from your description, it sounds like you've already read the books.
Yes,
is that right?
I'm a huge fan of the books.
Okay, great. So how is your caution and skepticism meters calibrated right now?
On the Sword and Laser podcast, we have had some in-depth discussions about whether Alexander Skarsgård is the right choice for Murderbot, because we never really know if Murderbot is a guy or a girl. And it's interesting how it came out in the discussion with our audience there of who thought, well, I always pictured it as a girl, and who thought, well, I always pictured it as a guy, and who was like, well, the audiobook sounds like a guy, but I always thought it was a girl. And whether Alexander Skarsgård was the right choice for that. I have to say that the pictures of Skarsgård look a little more human in the stuff they've released so far than I would have guessed. But I don't think Skarsgård, who played a vampire in True Blood, would be a bad choice for playing a sort of not human thing again, right? Playing something that has human characteristics, but is not entirely human. I think he did a good job of doing that as a vampire. And this is not a vampire, but there's some overlap in there. So I think that's fine. I hope that they can capture the humor, because one of the problems with adapting a book like this is it's first person. So you're always privy to what's happening in Murderbot's head, and it can be hilarious sometimes. And a lot of times you're like, oh my God, that's me. Any introvert is going to identify, and even extroverts are going to identify with the social awkwardness that Murderbot engages, because they're not human, and so it's exaggerated. Usually you end up mimicking that sort of thing with voiceovers, and that would be disappointing if that's all they do. So I'm curious to see how they capture that, if they capture that.
Well, and if this is me, hi, I just got here. I just found out that there's a thing called Murderbot. But it is important to remember that the rules of storytelling, there are different rules for moving picture shows versus a book. A book, you could take paragraphs and paragraphs of internal dialogue. You just don't have the time for that. Whereas by adding the extra dimensionality of a human face, you might be able to capture what I'm assuming are moments of incongruence, where you could have a face that's saying one thing and then an internal dialogue that's saying something else, and in very few syllables. I'm inventing some of this, but hopefully
Sure.
that I don't know if that's right.
Yeah, maybe. And you saying that gave me another idea. Is a lot of times Murderbot is talking to other computers. I don't want to get into spoilers, but some of Murderbot's friends are actually spaceships, like the AI on a spaceship. And those conversations can be had on screen, if you will, even though that's not really the way Murderbot would communicate. We could depict them as sort of a chat, like a text chat. And so you could actually get some of his personality across that way, some of the internal dialogue across that way. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to see what they do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I shouldn't speculate. I don't know anything about it.
Well, I'm interested to see what you think if you give it a try. May 16th on Apple TV+. Nickelodeon announced that the Avatar saga, which of course began with The Last Airbender, will continue with Avatar 7 Havens, a 2D animated series co-created by Bryan Konietzko and Michael DiMartino, the folks who worked on the first one.
Now, this one I will participate in the wild speculation on. What little chatter I saw seemed to be about within the fandom, essentially whatever it was they said about what they were going to do. It sounds like some fans read it as they're essentially going to call The Last Jedi on Legend of Korra. Like they're going to say that what Korra did in Legend of Korra, changing the rules of the big game about the spirit world and in the physical world, they're going to say, whoops, here are all the terrible problems that would cause, and now let's undo it. So I don't know. We'll see. But from what I understand, yes, it'll be animated. It's just the next in the series, right?
Yeah, and it's the people who did the series, right? So
yeah. It's the original creators.
Yeah. So you feel mostly positive about it, or
yeah, man, I trust those creators so much.
Right,
yeah,
good.
I mean, look, they bailed on the Netflix reattempt on it. They take their creative control very, very seriously, and they've been excellent stewards. 2 out of 2 so far. I have no reason to, and they bailed on anything that deviated too far from it. So I mean, sounds like they're going to crush it again.
Yeah. There's also kind of a buzz these days about streaming services taking independent podcasts and YouTube shows, more often YouTube shows, I think, and turning them into series. So Deadline had a couple of articles out there about Netflix making a series based on the YouTube show Blue Therapy, which is about relationships.
Cool.
Yeah, good for them. Also, over the weekend, Netflix streamed the SAG Awards. Remember, this is kind of the big deal that Netflix is getting an award show. It's one of their live efforts. We all often talk about news and sports being good live material, but award shows are also something that people watch in large numbers. Variety panned the broadcast, but if you read the column about it closely, it was pretty much for the production, not the tech. So you'll see the headline says something about sound glitches, which might make you think, oh, so Netflix streaming was at fault. Doesn't sound like it. It sounds like it was sound glitches in that like somebody's mic wasn't up at the right moment, or they tried to fade out Jane Fonda and talked over her, that kind of sound glitches. And also just generally saying they didn't like the writing of the jokes, or they took issue with the way Kristen Bell hosted, stuff like that. Netflix is on the hook for the production side of it too, but do you think this is good news or bad news that the actual panning was not about the technology?
Well, that's interesting, because what it does is it shines a spotlight on the gray area, the knife that cuts both ways. It's like it never even occurred to me to think about Netflix doing anything other than the back end distribution of it. But if they, for the first time, I'm having to consider what my trust level is with Netflix's not curation abilities, which is what historically it's been. They decide what creators to invest in or whatever. So that's all curation. This is them boots on the ground artistic production. And you know what? I don't think I get to hand wave it away. I think that if they got panned, then that's an indicator that they have maturing to go on the actual artistic production side of things.
Yeah. The awards were produced by Silent House Productions in partnership with SAG-AFTRA and Netflix.
Got it. So there was a third party that they contracted. So it would be more of the curation. Okay.
So it'd be the curation, but also the notes, like Netflix is the distributor here. So I assume they have a seat at the table when things are being decided. But yeah, they aren't, they are like the ABC to the Golden Globes Dick Clark Productions. Wait, is it ABC now? It used to be NBC, and now I can't remember. Maybe
Dick Clark was ABC because they would always do the circle ABC logo to the Dick Clark Productions.
Yeah.
Wow, the detritus that goes around in the cobwebs of this brain.
No kidding, man. All right, let's move on to the buried treasure.
Most people want to know why they suddenly got rich.
Buried treasure.
Of course, the buried treasure segment is where we talk about something we've been watching. Maybe it's of the moment, maybe it's not, but it's a way for us to maybe put something on your to-be-watched list. Brian, what you got?
We wrapped up the season 2 of Silo. I got to tell you, the last 3 episodes really kind of fell off for me.
Did they? Really?
I didn't care for it. I don't know if it was...
What was it?
We've talked about this before. I get allergic to when things go rubbery and it seems like there's no consequences to anything. And the moment, how could I put it? In a very nuts and bolts vacuum tube world, going completely Siri just is like, well, I guess there's no stakes on anything. Anything can happen anywhere. That's about as close as I could get.
Basically, too many people got away with too many death-defying situations.
Yeah, and there's a heel turn that takes all of, about 30 seconds at the end. They're like, I'm the biggest, baddest person that is a credible threat who's done terrible things. I changed my mind. Yeah, I'll join you.
I'm not so bad after all.
Yeah, but meanwhile, I'm only 2 episodes into this one, but boy, am I having a good time with the Disney Plus Marvel vehicle, Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Not too heavy-handed on explaining multiverse nothing or other. They've done a good enough job of explaining, a lot of different ways to tell Spider-Man. Here's another. And what I love about it is the artistic direction, the color palette, pure 1968. I mean, it is the yellowest yellows, the bluest blues. It nothing but primary colors. It's still computer animated, obviously, but also enough of a wink. Like the very beginning, it was really fun in the very first episode to be dropped in with a Peter Parker trying to make it to school and not knowing, is this before he gets his powers or after he gets his powers or whatever, and them intentionally messing with you, where it's like he misses the train and he's like, okay, oh, well, you know what that means. And he opens up his bag and it slows down and the music swells. And he's like, better just eat this sandwich. And then you're like, okay, so before the powers, but then the way he gets his powers is different. What he does with them is different.
Okay.
His power, it's great. It's great. I'm having a really good time.
Spider in the sandwich. No.
Yeah.
Cool. You know what? That actually makes me want to watch this.
Highly. I'll say that they also very clearly, within the first 15 minutes, set up a different origin story for the symbiote. They also set up a different origin story. They also, it's the first 10 minutes. They also deviate from traditionally, he gets bit by the spider. What happens? You squish the spider. This one, very conspicuously, the spider just trots on off.
Just scuttles off.
Goes off and hops in somebody else's backpack. Wonder if that's going to turn into anything.
Chekhov's spider.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
It's great. And even when Doctor Strange shows up, he goes, it's, and I'm like, oh, does he know who Doctor Strange is? He goes, some kind of weird wizard. I'm like, another fake out. It's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it. What about you?
Have you been watching the new White Lotus yet?
I skipped the first one because I knew it would just be a bunch of place setting, and I was waiting to hear chatter in moments like this.
Apparently 40% of the viewers of the first episode did the same thing, but watched the second. White Lotus hit 3.4 million viewers in the second episode, up 40% from the first one, which part of me wonders if that's just a new trend of people like going, oh yeah, that's back. I didn't have time this week. It's on demand. I don't have to watch the first episode. I can watch the first and the second whenever. So I'm curious if that will continue to raise. It also means that people heard it was good, or they wouldn't have gone ahead and started watching. I feel like in these first 2 episodes, they've done an excellent job of returning to some of the things that made the first season good without like totally just copying those things. So this season, if anyone doesn't know, is set at the White Lotus in Thailand. It's on a beach setting, so it's not in Bangkok. It's at a remote beach area. Episode 1 starts with the end, the way that season 1 did. If you remember, season 1 of White Lotus starts with a coffin being loaded on a plane. Season 3 of the White Lotus starts with a very different, like, oh, that's where we're going. You've got a really diverse in character. I mean, you got a diverse cast in other ways too, but you have a lot of different kinds of characters, but you also have some of those prototypes that have actually been in the first 2 seasons of White Lotus. So you have a dysfunctional family. You have this time you have a group of friends who are kind of the, I don't know if they're going to continue to like each other. You have a dysfunctional couple as well. But you've got a little more hints of crime happening in the backgrounds, like straight up crime, not like plans and cons sort of stuff. I'm curious if you end up watching it, what you think of it, because I'm finding it more enjoyable than season 2. Jury's out for me still if it's as good as season 1.
I definitely will watch it, and I wonder if this plays into it as well. Not only is there, probably, I guess, possibly some skepticism or just waiting to get confirmation that it's good, but also it's like season 1 and season 2, they so clearly made the first episode, they set a pattern where the first episode is literally nothing other than here's the cast. It's like, well, if I'm going to, might as well wait until next week where I can see what they're going to start doing with the cast. Yeah.
This episode starts by telling you where we're going, like revealing the ending like they did in season 1. So I think that's worth seeing. A lot of it is still like, let's introduce you to how douchey the older brother is and the mystery of the younger sister and the suspicious activity of the dad. And why is that guy so interested in the owner of the hotel? So yes, you could just read the Wikipedia article and get all that. I thought they did it well. And I like that. So, I like, okay, let's build up the mysteries. What's going on with this? Why does Lisa from Blackpink have an interesting relationship with the security guard? Where's that going? Like, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on, but I don't think you're wrong that if you just read up on it, you could jump into episode 2 and enjoy it quite well.
This would be interesting. It never even occurred to me to skip episode 1. I'm still going to watch it, but it's like,
watch it.
Well, no. I'm going to watch it, but I'm going to do it with the ability to keep on rolling forward to seeing something happen.
That's true. Something happens in episode 2. I know that's minor spoiler, I suppose, for some people.
But something happened in a TV show?
Well, but sometimes you're like, well, you're going to get a little more setup, more hints. You get action in episode 2. So I think you'll be pleased at least on that front. Cool. Anyway, that's The White Lotus on Max and HBO. If you've got something we should be on the lookout for, please email us, cordkillers@gmail.com. Bryan, I've been having fun.
Yeah? What do you, whereabouts? What have you been up to?
FreeTomNewsletter.com is now officially my outlet for whatever is on my mind.
I did see that you released back-to-backs. Here's last week's and this week's.
Well, that was just a mistake. I thought I had published the newsletter. I could have sworn I even saw the Substack confirmation, but apparently I hadn't, because when I went in to write 2 weeks ago's newsletter, the one from the week before was still sitting there in the drafts. So I just titled it "Here's Last Week's Newsletter" and published it.
That's awesome.
But yeah, this past week, 1 week I was right. I think it might've been the one that was "Here's Last Week's Newsletter." I was writing up something for Cordkillers, and I was like, I've got more to say on this, and I made it the newsletter topic. This week, this past Friday, I got caught up in a reply all situation. So I just wrote up my whole, how difficult it is when you're what is one of the most difficult things to do a reply all situation where you desperately as a human want to tell everyone to please stop replying to all. But the only way you can do it is to reply to all.
Tom, I worked, as many people know, I worked at Dell at the height of the dot-com bubble. I believe to this day, I was employed by Dell when their stock hit their all-time high. And I remember at Dell seeing a reply all situation come in and realizing, oh God, there's no stopping it, is there?
No, you just have to hope and pray and put faith in your fellow humans that enough of them will also resist the temptation. So, if you've got a thing where you're like, Tom, I know on technology news, you play it a certain way, and on Cordkillers, you're trying to keep it about cord cutting. What do you really think about this or that? Free Tom newsletter, just send me an email. Just respond to one of the newsletters and ask me, and I'll answer it in the newsletter. freetomnewsletter.com.
Yeah.
Send a scanning to avoid.
Scanning the horizon!
YouTube has been testing a lower-priced version of its paid video service called Premium Lite, Lite. That's how light it is. They can't even afford the G and the H in light. If you are,
I guess almost premium didn't test as well.
it was
Premium Lite.
It was spelled ALMOS.
Premium ambitions.
Premium Lite is being tested with users in Australia, Germany, and Thailand for several months, or it has been being tested with select users. It is not ad-free, but ads may appear on music content and shorts. So you pay a little bit. You get mostly ad-free, but they put a few ads in here and there. You don't get ads most of the time. What do you think of that? That's interesting.
I think this is a solution that everybody wants because look, ultimately nobody wants, including the people paying for the ads, nobody wants ads where they don't belong or where the audience is not in a good place to deal with them. Right now on YouTube, content gets uploaded and algorithms do their best to find natural breaks to inject ads. And truthfully, that little skip button down there that you watch as it counts from 5 down to 1, they love it when you hit that skip button because it is like you checking in and saying, I definitely watched this first 5 seconds and I'm actively participating in your focus group thing. I did hesitate 3 more seconds. Good job, whoever made this ad. But content in traditional broadcast television, 23-minute procedural, whatever, that is written with those breaks in mind. Instead, nobody is creating long-form YouTube content with those breaks in mind, and as a result, there's no natural place to put them. However, both music tends to be between 3 minutes and 7 minutes long per song. You could do 3-4 songs. All the rules for radio naturally apply, so you could go so many songs and then a natural ad break. Same thing with shorts. Shorts is just virtualized channel flipping, and so you could go same thing, natural break. I'll set the phone down and go pee while this unskippable 60-second ad plays or whatever. Right. You can do that with those formats. You cannot do that with the long form format naturally. However, here's the only reason that they're testing this, if I were to guess. It's not that it's not the right idea. It's definitely the right idea, and it is a good product. It may be too confusing. That's what they're testing for, is whether or not the market is ready for this new category of diet premium or almost velvet or whatever it is they're calling it. Mushy middle is
I can't believe it's not ads.
I can't believe it's not lot premium. That's if I were to guess what they're really testing on this.
Yeah. It also struck me that music content may be more expensive for YouTube because of licensing issues and deals.
And maybe they only run ads. Like, for example, if you listen to a bunch of indie artists, maybe you almost never get ads.
Yeah.
But if you listen to a bunch of classic rock, then it's like, well, we got to pay for this somehow. We're going to dish you up more ads.
End of an era in sports broadcasting. ESPN has been broadcasting Major League Baseball since 1990, but it exercised an option to end its contract early after this season. The contract doesn't end until 2028, but they had an option to end it in 2025, and they're gonna. So after this season, no Major League Baseball is guaranteed to appear on ESPN next season. ESPN says it's exploring ways to serve baseball fans in other ways. They don't want to cut off Major League Baseball. They just don't like this contract. It's possible, some people have speculated, that they might want to do something like they do with the NHL, where they provide all the regional broadcasts for baseball, which would actually increase the amount of baseball on ESPN without increasing the expense, because they wouldn't have to pay for their own broadcasters anymore. I know Major League Baseball is trying to take control of regional broadcasts themselves and might be willing to bootstrap that if they had a guaranteed contract coming with ESPN. But it struck me that ESPN is like, yeah, that old model that was going to run through 2028, that's not going to last through 2028. We need a new model now. And so they opted out to do that.
So, yeah, well, I mean, I guess a 25-year-old model, it's regardless, to be honest, like
35-year-old model.
Or 35-year-old. Yeah, sorry. Cool. That's so old. I can make that mistake now. I'm a big fan of shaking things up periodically, if for no other reason than just to find out if you had it to do all over again, would you choose it? Because maybe they turn around and they do another 35-year contract or something.
Yeah,
but
right.
At least now that certainly the landscape has changed. And so now's a good time for them to date around and find options.
Finally, Netflix now has 52% viewership share in Southeast Asia and 42% revenue share in streaming in Southeast Asia. Max debuted there in November and already has a 24% share. And the rest of it is kind of split up amongst some regional services like Video and View, as well as Disney Plus, which has been there for a while. But yeah, it looks like Netflix just kicking it on the Southeast Asian stage.
Yeah. Congrats, Netflix. Maybe it'll turn into something someday.
Well, I think I threw this in here because a lot of the talk is like, well, Netflix's subscribers have plateaued. And the answer is yes. In the United States, where they've operated since literally the 90s as a DVD rental organization, they have plateaued. But they have a lot of room to grow and succeed in other regional markets. You can't just move into Southeast Asia and say, we're Netflix. You've got to provide programming and subscription levels and subscription ease that works for the people in that market. And it seems like they've done that.
Yep.
Let's move on to the chatter.
You've got mail.
So I know a lot of you, probably the majority of you, listen to this on demand or even watch it on demand. But we do have a decent number of people who watch us live. And we have been doing the show on Tuesdays. We sort of discussed on After Talk last week the idea of making that permanent. And we got some feedback. Tim says, it sounds like the decision has already been made, but let me put in my 2 cents as one of your bosses for not moving the recording on Tuesdays. I have a pretty big list of podcasts I regularly listen to, and certain days that there's room in the schedule for them. Having Cordkillers come out on Monday or Tuesday works great for that. If it isn't out until Wednesday, or even later in the day on Tuesday, there's an increased chance that I just won't get to it, as I'll already be buried in other shows that came out earlier in the week. There's only so much time, and the current cadence works well for me. I don't even mind that there are some weeks you take off because of holidays, as an occasional break from the show is refreshing for both of you and for the listener, just to shake it up and to make us miss you on the weeks that there's no episode.
Yeah, right. I hear your counter proposal, and here's my counter proposal. Tim, we're going to be so good, so insightful, so hilarious, funny, charming, loving, incredible, attentive, and handsome, you will have no choice but to adjust your schedule.
That's right. And if that isn't good enough for you, take it from another Tim who wrote, Bryan, Tom, and Amos. Tuesday will feel normal for me as it was the day that I watched, as that was when the video version came out. Looking forward to actually watching March Madness this year after picking up YouTube TV for a couple of months, as it doesn't think I'm outside of the country despite me using Starlink. I can use the awesome jury quad mode, but for games. My wife did freak out a little when she saw the bill, but I caught her watching the quad the other day, so I think I'm forgiven.
Good job, Tim.
So yeah, Tim good with the move. Patreon boss number 97 writes, I approve of starting the show at 5 p.m. Central Time. This will allow me to watch Cordkillers and have time for Dollar Taco and Wing Night. Mondays are the best now, right? I can make Tuesday at 4:30 or 5 work if Bryan stays live between shows, but After Talk can put a wrinkle in that.
Yeah, well, that's where we're hoping to get to. I think we're going to have to drop off for a gap in the live programming today, but I mean, this is probably, a lot of moving pieces. We're designing everything to be modular and to figure out how to best suit everyone's workflow.
We could always do After Talk before the show, but then it wouldn't be After Talk.
Yeah, you know what? We could talk it. We could talk. I can't believe it's not After Talk.
Sean the Dad writes, Danica McKellar doesn't get the same recognition that Fred Savage gets, probably because she hopped off the acting track and got a degree in mathematics with the Chayes-McKellar-Wynn theorem named after her and her colleagues. Fred Savage, on the other hand, still uses his phone's calculator to figure out a tip on a bill.
Man, freaking Fred Savage, you just got served. Wow.
Yeah, where's your math degree, Fred Savage? And finally, Ed Ross writes, hello again. Speaking of ITV, the fourth season of Snowpiercer, along with seasons 1 through 3, which are also on Netflix, has finally made its way to UK on ITV streaming service ITVX. Maybe I'm the only person left waiting for this, but just in case there are others, I thought you might want to know. Ed in Gosport, UK.
By the way, Ed did one of my favorite email tricks, which is picking up a conversational thread from 4 years ago as if nothing has happened. It was a previous thing where we were chatting about what content was on Channel 4, and then he just replies again with no acknowledgement of the 4-year interregnum. Mwah, chef's kiss. I love
Beautiful,
it.
beautiful. Thank you so much, Ed. Also, thank you for supporting our show, whether it's just by listening or supporting us at patreon.com/Cordkillers. Our website is cordkillers.com. Our email address is cordkillers@gmail.com. And we are live on twitch.tv/nightattack Tuesdays?
Question mark?
At 2:30 Pacific, 5:30 Eastern. Anyway, we'll let you know it After Dark for sure. Talk to you later.